the quiz is now closed. And I'm gonna go over the answers now. Yes, and again, traffic, life, weather. You're in medical, doesn't matter. If 8 a.m. is the start time, 8 a.m. is the start time, and that even includes me. So we had an announced exam, and again, it's timestamped. So those of you who are looking at this, because of course this is being recorded, the opportunity is now over. Right? I even waited 5 minutes against my better judgment. Let's look at some of these questions, because the most important part of an examination is the after analysis. And if you look at this, the neat thing about having everything online is that we can now look at things. So you see, class average is still in the 60s, right? But we still had people scoring in the 90s, and you look, the majority of the class is more than here. Now, what does standard deviation mean? Standard deviation is how many, like the lowest and the highest score, how far away was it from the median or the mean of the class? That means where there are a lot of people who pass, a lot of people who fail, and standard deviation of 2.16 means what? It's close. That means everyone was in the same area. Now, what does this also prove? If class average last time for quiz 1 was 62, and you guys only improved 5 points over the last weekend, that means what? You're doing exactly what I said not to do. Don't look at your exams as, okay, I did poorly, I'm just going to do better on the next one. You have to stop and think and analyze, because even if you had a 90, think about it. The 10% you missed, could it be something that's important, that's integral to your job, that you will mess up in the near future? Yes. So you have to go fix it. And another neat thing that it does is that it this program, that why we do all things online, is we can now see what went down. And oh, by the way, I took the same exact questions. Actually, I think I took the first 10 questions of your quiz, and I just made different versions of it. So it should, because that means if you looked at the things or analyzed what you got wrong, or you went back and restudied things over the weekend because you needed to, because wasn't the quiz part of the exam? So one of the questions was, which of the following blood tests shows the percent formed? Right, the majority of the class got it, but a couple of you got wrong. And remember what I stated? Why do people answer questions that we never talked about? Did we ever talk about, or did you ever see a slide last week that said red blood cell indices or indexes? No, ModTech would know what that is. I mentioned hemoglobin, but again, it sounds like hematocrit, but the hemoglobin was hemo, blood, globin, protein. And the white blood cell differential is what? What's the function of our white blood cells? It's to protect, right? Has nothing to do with that hydration status, but we talked about the hematocrit. Your hematocrit, hydration status, that's the percent of what? The plasma, which is the fluid part, and the formed elements, which is the cellular or dry parts. I even took the same name. Megan has type A blood. What kind of antigens are found in Megan's blood? And of course, if she has A blood, she has A antigen. If she has B blood, B antigen. If she has AB blood, AB antigen. And if she has O, she has what? She has no antigens. Now, remember the D antigen? That was for what? RH. So the D antigen, it's good no one fell for it, had nothing to do with this. Next one, you guys did good. Tachycardia, that's easy, because the quiz asked you a bradycardia question. Eucardia and normal cardia are the same thing. This one's good, remember? Now, it goes, it's important for to know your white blood cell differential. So, of course, neutrophils is the most abundant, And what do we have most of in this world? Bacterial infections. Eosinophil, you think of what? Right here, parasitic and allergic reactions, right? Basophils, some allergies, but basophils, the big thing about basophils was what? What's the big thing about basophils? Right, remember? Histamines, heparins, inflammation. Which of the following valves located between the left ventricle and left atrium? Remember? The left side, bicuspid. The right side, tricuspid. Which of the following valves is located at the exit of the left ventricle? What exits the left ventricle? The aorta. So, got to be the aortic semilunar valve. I just took the murmur question. Now, if you saw the murmur question, the murmur was the question. Now, do you think you could easily do what? Make the question an answer. So your quiz was something like, what is a murmur, right? But then I did what? The exact opposite. And what's a murmur? It's a sound, a heart sound. Where do we get the heart sounds from? Valves open and close. Remember when we went and looked at the anatomage, we saw the valves open and close. And I remember we talked about lub and dub. Which of the following agranulates makes memory cells? That's B lymphocytes. And we're going to talk more about that today in detail because this week we're all about infection. And everybody in this room, especially the techs, that's going to be our bread and butter. You got to know what the B cells and T cells do. And those are lymphocytes. Those are agranulocytes. They don't have granules, but they make memory. Meaning, once you get sick, your immune system remembers it. And last but not least, this was a pretty good one, and we mentioned also this in class. Remember the 3 plasma proteins: fibrinogen, immunoglobulin, and albumin. Fibrinogens deal with what? Remember the fibers that connect with the sticky platelets to make a clot? We're going to talk more about immunoglobulins today. Immuno means your immune system. Globulin means protein. So there are a whole bunch of proteins. I'm going to put the door open this stuff. Immunoglobulin. You look at it, immuno means immune. So we're going to learn about a whole bunch of proteins that we can look at in our plasma. And now you know why when they take your blood, there's different tubes, and especially if it's a red top or a mottled top, and especially if it has that little wax or plastic at the bottom, that's an SST tube. That means I have to spin, right, serum separator tube. I have to spin it in a centrifuge, and then you're going to get the plasma and the red blood cells with a little white layer there called the buffy coat for our white blood cells and platelets. And you need that because don't you think I'm going to need to know how much albumin I have for water balance, how much immunoglobulins I have for my immune system, and how much fibrinogen I have for my clotting. So everything we do at the hospital, every rule, every process has an anatomical or physiological reason behind it. Hence, that's why your A&P is up first. And you can see here, overall, this discrimination index, what is this? You click on it, right? It shows how did students misunderstand the concept. And if you see here, it's less than 1. So it shows that what? The majority of the respondents, or the majority of the people who answered the test, answered it correctly. And then with the other statistics that we saw up here, right? Majority of the classes where? Here, around passing, right? And you had somebody who scored a 90. Actually, we had more than 1. So that means what? The test is valid. That's how you know. That's how we as the teachers know that it's fair. And also the fact that this is like the 20th time this course has been taken. And did we fail a whole bunch of people? Nah. So let's look at the same exact thing for the weekend's quiz, weekend's exam, which is pretty good. So let's show the stats for the exam, and then let's look at the questions that gave the class in general trouble. Well, actually, let's just jump right to it because I already told you guys that the stats were good. Class average was an 86, much better than this quiz and last week's quiz. But if you look at, I think it's a BIO104. If you look at the announcements, I put a practice quiz based on and Kahoot exam errata. Errata means not one error, but a whole bunch of errors, right? So if anyone's not familiar with Kahoot, it's like kind of like it's online children's game. It's very, very colorful, but a lot of the nurses use this, and there's this other thing they use. I forgot. It's called Anya or Ikea. I forgot what it is. It starts with A. Sounds very Japanese. It's an online flashcard game. But the neat thing about that flashcard game is, just like this one is that you can do your own analysis and you can figure out right from wrong. So let's go to this Kahoot, right? And let me log in. And I think my password's password. A good idea to have is always have like a piece of paper or something that that has your passwords and stuff. And of course, I put it on the cloud so I can. All right. So exam 1 errata. So when I looked at the stats, I looked at all the questions where it gave the students some trouble. So let's go over this together, or if you clicked on the link, you could play along, but I'm going to start it. Oh, by the way, and I counted, it took me not even 12 minutes to make this quiz. So what could you do? You could take your IRs, and that's actually what we're going to do later today. You can take your IRs. There's already questions in it. You just what? Make multiple choice. Question. Yeah. Well, you could if you want. I'm putting it up here. There's, I guess, classic mode. I don't know. And apparently that's pin. If you 48781, I'm just gonna lock this game. No, I don't want to lock this game. Wait for players. I just want to play it. Okay, if someone could, Cat in the Hat. Oh no, there's a bunny. Sorry, I don't know my animals. Now it's a burger. It's Burger King. But you can see it's very friendly and whatnot. And let's just start. Right. The link is on what do you call that? It's on your announcements on practice quiz. So when it starts up, and so where's the apex of the heart? And I made it quite fast. So of course you do your process of elimination. Is it the area superior to my great vessels? My great vessels here, so it's up top. Nope. Is it the tip of the heart pointing to the left? Does my heart point to the left? Yeah. You already saw that in the anatomy. Tip of the heart doesn't point to the right. And the area superior to the atria. So I did my process of elimination. It's not this. It's not this. It's not the red. It's not the yellow. It's not the green. So what's the best answer? And that's it. That's correct. Next. What is this, a lemur? And how did your score become, I don't know. I didn't set it up. So which of the following formed elements clots blood? Does an erythrocyte do any clotting? Nope. Lymphocyte, does it do any clotting? Eh. Thrombocyte, does that clot things? Yep. But am I done? I have to look at all my options. Neutrophil, isn't a neutrophil what's it called? It's a white blood cell, just like this lymphocyte. So best answer would be, of course, thrombocyte. But I said it. I should have said it to like 1 minute, but I said it a little fast. But do you see what it does? Now you're gamifying, and it's a little bit less boring than it would be just by studying it outright. And what are you now actually doing? You're now actually practicing what's about to go down in your real exam, in your real quizzes. Because remember, the majority, not majority, why do I always say majority? All of your licensing examinations are multiple choice. Okay? So those are formed elements. Thinks what? Clotting blood. I'll fix the scores. I don't know why is it. Which of the following means to decrease in platelets? So all of them have penia. So that means all of them mean what? Pennies. Decrease in the dollar. So which one is platelet? Leukocytopenia, is that a platelet? No, that's white blood cell. Erythrocytopenia, is that a platelet? No, that's red blood cell. And what's the best option? Thrombocytopenia, because the thrombocyte is a what? That's a platelet. Platelets clot. How's this question? Can you take the question clinically further? If my patient is thrombocytopenia, what are you going to see clinically? If my patient can't clot, what are you going to see? Blood. They're going to bleed out, right? So, and there's a lot of patients on blood thinners, and those blood thinners have to be modulated every like 72 hours or so, right? So patient comes in, it's like, hey, I was brushing my teeth, now it's all pink. That means what? You got to adjust meds. My patient has thrombocytopenia. And remember, homeostasis. Too much of a good thing becomes a bad thing. Too little of a good thing becomes a bad thing. Everything needs to be where? In the middle. And we're not gods and goddesses of life. Don't get that out of your head that we somehow control life. We don't. It's too complex. What's the only thing we can control? The anatomy and physiology of homeostasis. So if someone's over here with too much, what do we try to do? We try to bring them in to get where? Homeostasis, in the middle. If someone's too little, what do? We give them products and do that. And that's all that healthcare is. That's why you will see it called medical or surgical management. We're just managing anatomy and physiology. Next one. Leo, every time I see Leo, I think law enforcement officer. I used to run a program, so every time I see Leo, I think cops. Which of the following is a function of my red bone marrow? So hemat, but a hematoma, is that normal? No, that's a thing. Hematopoiesis, hey, that sounds good. Hemolysis, that's when there's breakdown. Hematology, that's the department. So which is the best one? Hematopoiesis, right? And then you could go home and it records your answers. So what can you do? Retake the quiz, retake the quiz. Always hit up the ones you get wrong over and over again. By the way, that I gotta find out the name of the flashcards. I'll ask my seniors because they make those flashcard games all the time. It's really neat. When they make the flashcard games, the ones they have wrong end up in a different file. And then they re-quiz what? All the ones they got wrong. So what happens to your score, right? Now, don't be depressed if you didn't improve your score from last week because you didn't know. You didn't know this is the way to correct scores, right? That's why, how many of you took the SATs, really, really studied, and then got the same exact score? Or lower? How about that? That's even more depressing. And why? Not because you're a bad test taker, not because you're mentally retarded or deficient somehow. It's because you didn't know this trick. This trick is to do what? Work on your deficiencies, then what happens? Your deficiencies cease to become a deficiency or cease to become a liability, right? You ever see bros at the gym? They got these huge biceps, triceps, huge pecs, but they wear sweats and then they wear shorts in the summer. You can see those skinny little legs because they did what? They missed leg day. No one likes leg day. It's awful. Anyone here do leg day? It's gross, isn't it? And then you can't walk up and down stairs, then you can't sit right. But what's it doing? You're having the balance. If you do upper body, you got to do lower body. But you have to work on the things you're not good at. And if you work, and if you're honest and strive for that, what's going to happen to your scores, right? They will improve drastically. Let's look at this one. Which of the following is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease? Surprisingly, like something like 40% of you got this wrong. When even though before this class you knew what's the bad thing out of all these things? Hypertension. I don't, but again, why would you pick something that isn't the answer? Welcome, sir. Why would you pick something that isn't the answer? Because remember, quiz show mentality, right? You see something that sticks out, so what do? You pounce on it. But is that part of our protocol? No, our protocol is what? Read all the questions, analyze, do your process of elimination. Then pick the one that we want and then check, right? When I come see you, each and every patient, do I go, oh, she's got a cold, Keflex? Do I automatically do that? That's called knee-jerk medicine. That's the worst kind of medicine in the world because what's a knee-jerk? When I hit your knee, are you using your brain? It's a reflex. But we're in medical, we use our brains. So when you're actually taking an exam, you should be analyzing and running your protocol. And the protocol, for those of you who are a little bit nervous, and most people are nervous when they take the exam, you practice this at home, what happens? Remember we talked about how does a firefighter enter a burning room? Have any of you ever been in a burning room? I was in 2 fires when I was a kid. It is ridiculous hot. And you just want to run away. But these men and women go what? Into the fire. And they do it daily. Why? Because they trained for it. Are they crazy? Maybe a little bit, but they're trained for that craziness. So we're trained for this craziness as well. So we look at the next one. And in the running is Burger King. And next one. Which of the following patients have a D antigen? So what do we know about D antigen? Is it the letter in the front or is it the plus or negative? The plus or negative. Now, which is the one that sticks out? Negative, 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 plus. The antigen, positive, the antigen. So the answer is what? B positive, the green. I don't know if you can tell that it's green or not. All right, next. Johnny has type A blood. Right? So type AB blood, what does that mean? Right? Of course he's not a vampire. Of course he's not a familiar. I just ran out of things to say. But it's either universal recipient or universal donor. The funny part was almost all of you got universal donor. But then when it went to AB, 20% of you still got it wrong. So that means what? If you know something that's on the same coin, universal donor versus universal recipient, know that one, depending your life on it, and the other one is what? The other side of the coin, right? They're not separate entities. That was a surprising finding that I had over the weekend. Which of the following is the fluid part of your blood, right? The red blood cell, oh, plasma, that looks good. Formed elements, that's my red blood cell, white blood cell. Not this. So do you see the thing that's sticking out? Of course, it's plasma. And you could sit there and try to memorize all the words on all the slides. But remember that picture we saw of the blood that was spun down? There was yellow on the top, and it said what? Plasma. Now, this is how I remember it. When I was in EMS and going through anatomy physiology, just like you guys, I was like, hey, plasma looks like P. Plasma. To this day, I still look at plasma, and it looks like urine to me. But you guys remember, whatever stupid thing that you can get into your head, and it'll stay there. It's 30 plus years since I was a tech, but it's still in there. And that's where you want it. You want it in long-term memory. You don't want it just for today. What makes a heart sound? Lub-dub, right? A lot of people got this one wrong. Is it blood hitting the arteries? No, you can't hear that. Is it blood hitting the heart wall? No, you can't hear that. Opening of heart valves? right? I open the door, it makes a sound, right? Well, what's a bigger sound? If I open the door, not a lot of sound, right? But if I close it, that's a sound, right? And that is what is a murmur. And of course, you know, those of us who have an older home, you know if the door is messed up, right? You ever have a door, right? Maybe a little up there and goes, yeah, and then makes the closing sound, or goes, it makes a different sound than the other doors. Don't you think that's how we identify murmurs? Because we know what normal looks like, and abnormal is simply what? Normal, all messed up. Not saying your house is messed up, I'm just saying mine is. Then, last but not least, which of the following is a formed element of blood that carries oxygen? Who's the only one that looks like a lifesaver that I throw in the water? Right? Red blood cell. So now you know it's red blood cell. Which one's the red blood cell? Erythrocyte. Thrombocytes clotting, plasma the liquid, leukocyte is the white blood cell. So, of course, just that. Now, how long did that take? Didn't take very long, right? Let's look at the time what we got. I finished the exam 8:20, then I started talking 20 minutes. So just imagine, right? You did a 20 minutes and then you spent another 12 minutes making up another quiz. Then you hit this quiz again. You keep on doing that. What happens during game time? When you look at the independent review, there's only what, 25, 30 questions. So that's like every possible thing they could ask. So whoever the author was of this course show is a sweetheart. He or she didn't have to do that for you, did they? Right? But why are they doing it for you? Not to hold your hand, to show you how it's done. Because one of these days you're going to be in a class, right? Especially those of you who want to go to medical school, and they'll say 40 chapters by February 6th, exam on February 7th. 40 chapters. How do you do that? Right? What do? You take each chapter and you find what? Most important topic. Right? Don't you think I could still create a Kahoot? I wish we had something like this in medical school. You know what we did in medical school? They just hired people like me. I'm a medical assistant. I type 105 words a minute. And I was doing medical stuff. So they were like, hey, let's get the dumb kid to do what? To type all the notes. And we made what? Practice questions. And one of the first things I did my first week in medical school, right? It was kind of like prison. I know, hear me out on this one, right? You know, prison, what do you got? Like, you know, all those corny prison movies, what do they say? You gotta go find the biggest, toughest person, and you gotta take that person out. Medical school, I thought the exact opposite. I gotta find the smartest person in the room and be their best friend, because I know for a fact I'm not the smartest tool in this house. And now I'm with 444 academic sharks. A third of us already had master's degrees. Everyone has money, and everyone has been smart since the day they were a fetus. So what did I do? I found this young lady, her name's Grace, who eventually became our valedictorian. Her and her cousin were valedictorian and salutatorian, and they went to the same school. And they went to the school, you know why? They could have went to Harvard or anywhere else. The only reason why they went to University of Medicine Dentistry, because their aunt lived 3 blocks down. That's the only reason. Both of them got into really good medical schools. But they chose number 130th in the country, which is New Jersey Med. I got waitlisted twice just to be there, right? Morning, welcome, right? So what do? What's the first thing I did when I met Grace? Grace, how do you study? She's like, I just read. And then I go, okay, that's weird, right? And then she goes, then I figure out which are atopics. And I go, what are atopics? Atopics are topics that will definitely come out. And she goes, then there are B topics. Those are the ones, if I get those, I'll probably ace the exam with a percentile greater than 90. And I go, okay. And then goes, then what's Charlie topics? Oh, that's trivia. I do that if I have time. So what did she focus on? Always the high value. Isn't the stuff that we went over the stuff that you heard over and over again? And isn't that the high value? All right. And then what did we do? We trained the A topics over and over again. And then when Grace got bored, she did the B topics. Then she did the C topics. Every year there's an international competition of quiz shows. Grace made it to the finals, but she made it in particular fashion. She did so many questions. I know because I'm the one who typed them out. I think it was like 10,000 questions. So she prepped 10,000 plus questions. I'm the guy who typed it out. Came out to a thing about this big, this thick. In the middle of the game, she said, excuse me, this question is invalid. And of course, all of this MD PhDs, because how does a student first year tell me this is invalid? We did so many questions that she figured out what was valid, what was invalid. And then when she saw a question that was a little bit off, she was able to read it. That's what this kind of studying is going to do for you. It's going to lead you to the answer, right? So those of you who study well, if you're a switcheroo, do not change your answer unless you are 110% sure that you messed up, right? And you notice, like, because if you study and practice, the answer kind of comes to you, right? You don't know why, but I know that when I'm looking at this, this is not it, this is not it. And that brings me to the other topic that I'm always reminding students about is many times you don't know the right answer. That's okay. But what can you do when you do your process of elimination? You can eliminate the thing because that doesn't belong. So right here, I'm asking for a formed element. Right off the bat, you can cross off plasma. Then it says carries oxygen. Leukocyte doesn't carry anything. Thrombocyte doesn't carry anything. Not quite sure if I remember if this carries anything, but I know for a fact that this is clotting and this is defending me against disease. So if I crossed out this, this, and this, what do I got left? The answer, right? Actually, Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes, has this wonderful saying, like, if you eliminate all possibilities, the one possibility that's left, albeit highly improbable, it's got to be the answer. And if you're running through this exam with no emotion, right? There's this woman, she was on like The View or something like that, and she was like some big time nurse, and she was saying that she lost it recently. Can you imagine your nurse losing it and crying and sobbing and breaking down to the floor? And then she was like, well, we have to show our emotion. No, I don't. Right? Because your family member needs who? Needs me to be what? Now, inside, of course, when we're all dealing with something, right? It's painful. But as a professional, I gotta be what? Hey, this thing? Taking quizzes? Is quizzes fun? No, I'd rather have my nails pull out than take another exam. Every year I tell myself, oh, I'm not gonna take any more exams, I've had it. And then what happens every month? All of us have to take continuing medical education. Guess what? Back in the day, you show up to a CME, you sign, you eat a bagel, you leave, you get the points. Those days are gone. You now have to show up, you have to have your cam on. It's just like a class. There's a pre-test and a post-test. Sound real familiar? Right? And this is our future. You want to keep your job, right? You got to go through these trainings. Even though I'm no longer a licensed physician, what do I have to do? In order for me to keep this job, I still have to take tests on a regular basis. Because when does medicine change? It changes every minute. So look at that, and I'm going to put more Kahoots, and I'm going to put them up so you guys can practice. And this is, again, this is what I ask all students when they don't do well on exams. Did you practice? Oh, I studied. No, that's not what I asked, right? Did you practice, right? Again, back to my analogy of the prize fighter. If I'm going into the ring, do I just watch a video? Do I just hit the bag? No, I better get into a ring with somebody similar. Let's say, for example, I was preparing for states and the kid was a monster. He went down from like 124 to 116. That means he was good 8 to 10 pounds heavier and badder than me, right? Had a lot of strength. So what do you think I did for 6 months? I was 115 pounds. I trained with a dude who was 140. So I can be used to being what? Well, I'm used to being small, but I'm used to being what? Ragdoll. Right? You ever see wrestling? Ragdoll is what? When the guy is way too strong. So what happened to me in states? I lost, but that's not the point. right? The point was, I held my own, right? I lost what, 3-1? Nothing to be ashamed about, but I cried. Again, back to emotion. You let emotion get the best of you. I cried, I lost it, and I didn't go to school for 2 days because I was so embarrassed that I let my team down. And when in reality, I shouldn't have been embarrassed. I trained for 6 months, I trained hard, and I got the state jacket just like everybody else because I worked for it. But then, when you're a kid, those of you guys, are anyone here in sports or were in sports? Remember when it was like life or death? Like if you lost a meet, it was like the worst thing in the world, and you felt like such a loser. And then of course your friends don't help. Like, hey man, that was a messed up meet. You should have won that, and you feel even worse. But remember, we're now in college and we're now smarter. It's not about the loss. It's about what you learn from the loss. So if you got an 80, don't be patting yourself on the back. You should be looking at the 20% that you missed. That's a true professional. That's the one. That's the one that will do right by your patient. So I put that there in announcements. So look at announcements regularly because I like putting like practice things, and I like putting videos and helpful hints. So if you look at here, first day video lectures, I also put how to deal with multiple, right? What else did I put up here? And of course, I'll always put the live lecture as well. So with that being said, extra credit quiz, review of last exam, statistics. Let us now, it's the top of the hour. Let's just jump right in to the lecture proper. So what are we doing today? We are doing immunology. So immunology, Logi, study of what? Don't be shy, call it out. What? What's immunology? What? Explain it to me like I'm a 10-year-old. Immunology, study of immunity. So then, what's immunity? What's immunity? Yeah, that's like saying, what's your car? He goes, oh, the automobile. No, come on, tell me, what's that? Like, you know how your body. It's your what? Defense system. Now, who am I defending against? Pathogen. Now, what's a pathogen? Patho is what? Means what? Disease. Is that normal or abnormal? Abnormal. So pathogen, gen, we already know something that generates. Those of you who are a little bit on the religious side, first book of the Bible is what? Genesis, creation, right? But for us, pathogen means something that creates disease, which could be anything. Remember last term, for those of you who had me for midterm, there's 250 things in here, in this room, I am not exaggerating, that can kill you. If you didn't have an immune system, it can easily kill you. But why doesn't it? Because we have an immune system. And it's also a part of the lymphatics. So if you see in here lymphatics, that's also the tubing. Because remember the cardiovascular system, you had the heart, and you have all this tubing. Well, your lymphatic vessels is also that tubing. So let's look at this. What is the lymphatic ick pertaining to your lymph and your immune systems? Work to protect the body against infection. Now, right now, there's a lot of nasty things inside your body, but it's not going to kill you. For example, EBV. You guys heard about EBV, Epstein-Barr virus. Oh, it's like the next COVID. It's going to give us a respiratory. If I assayed the entire room, 40% of you would be EBV positive. But why are you guys coughing up at a lung right now? Because it is what? Under control. Now, infection is when one or two things happen. The number of pathogens gets too much, and the location of it is in the wrong place. For example, E. coli. What's E. coli? Escherichia coli. Where did we get it from? Where have we heard it from? Raw chicken. Raw chicken or what? You go to Wendy's, someone went to the bathroom, didn't wipe their hands, wash their hands, and then made you a sandwich. They made you an E. coli sandwich. So they scratched back here, made you a sandwich without gloves, and now you're sick. Because where's E. coli? Escherichia coli is only in my colon. It should be here. It's normally here. Should it be on my sandwich? Should it be on my hands? Nope. How's this? All of us right now, we're all clean, right? Very clean class, right? But you're teeming with Staphylococcus aureus and Staphylococcus epidermidis. Tons of it. But as long as it's where? On the outside, we're all good. This is why I have a problem with all surgeries. I'm an internist, so of course I have a problem with surgery. Let's pretend my right hand here. Let me put on the cam. The cams can see me. I guess that won't work. All right, never mind. The class will get it. Everyone online won't. So this is my skin. On the top part, on the epidermis, right, has all that Staphylococcus aureus, Staphylococcus epidermidis. You don't want to know what's in your hair. That's a different story. That's some nasty stuff in there. Put all the shampoo made out of gasoline. You're still gonna have these little buggies. They're called dermatophytes. They're gross. But let's just talk about Staphylococcus aureus. If I take a scalpel, right, no matter how clean I'm gonna make this, there's always some Staphylococcus in there. So what happens when I cut? You see what's happening? I will now push the dirt where? Inside. Now, the thing on the outside that doesn't bother anybody is now where? On the inside. If I have a staph infection that goes septic, your patient would be dead in a couple of hours. And those of you who are techs, if the point source is what? Your surgery, guess who they're going to start blaming? They're going to start blaming what? Anyone who touched the patient pre-op or intraoperative. Right? And that's you. If you don't, because, and no matter how much you have a sterile field, no matter what, there's going to be an infection. Why do you think 24 hours prior to the surgery, we give our patient prophylactic antibiotics? Because we know it's coming, right? We know you're going to get sick. And prophylaxis, pro means what? Before. Prophylaxis means to protect. So I want to protect my patient before, right? So that's what's happening in the lymphatic and immune system. It's constantly protecting you, right? And we need tubing. You need your lymph nodes and lymphatic vessels to transport not only fat. And why is fat so important to this immune system? What do we know about fat? Again, too much of a good thing? Not a good. Too little fats, not a good thing. We need to be here. What do I think I may have lectured this in midterm? Can't remember. But fats are important because don't they store energy? When I'm fighting off an infection, don't you think my white blood cells, my soldiers need food, need energy? So the lymphatic system is going to have lymph fluid, and there's a lot of lipids in lymph fluid. Think lymph fluid, lipids, fats. So it works all together. Lymphatic system. We know this is immune system, so it's got to be the white blood cells. You have a whole bunch of lymphatic tissues. We're going to talk about examples of those. And you also have lymphatic organs. We're going to talk about examples of those. And the main one is our white blood cells. Remember, again, do you think you're going to get hit again with that white blood cell differential? Yes. So know what your neutrophils are. Know what your granulocytes versus agranulocytes are. Because what are they going to fight? Pathogens. Now, what's a pathogen? Anything that can potentially generate disease. Right? Generate, start trouble, pathogen. So, virus. Are viruses very, very big or very, very small? They're very, very small. They are so small that they will go through your skin. They will also go through the cell membrane. They'll also go through the nuclear membrane because viruses are parasites. They love DNA or RNA. And if you recall, the DNA and RNA is the code of who you are. So it's like the nastiest home invasion. So let's say this is a virus. The way the immune system works is they see it, right? And you kill it, right? I recognize it. Remember the antigen? The coding on it says what? This is a virus. This is a bad guy. So what is my white blood cells going to do? They're gonna take it, phagocytose it, they're gonna eat it. Remember phagocytosis? Phagophagio means to eat. Cyte means cell. Now here's the problem. This thing loves very small and goes inside. Can you see it now? No. But I'm a good cell. So on the outside, my antigens are saying what? Look, here's my ID. Here's my ID saying that I'm the good guy. But what's happening inside? So you think of viruses like a nasty home invasion. So let's say you're a police officer, you're making your rounds in the neighborhood. What does that house look like on the outside? Looks fine. But what's going on inside? Horrible, horrible things. Now, what's the horrible thing that the viruses do? They hijack DNA and RNA. They tell the code, hey, we're not making normal cells anymore. I want to make more friends so I can party. 10,000, 40,000, a couple of million of these. This is the reason why we can't deal with the common cold. This is the reason why we couldn't get rid of COVID. This is the reason also why we can't get rid of AIDS. Because this thing will do what? Change the code and it does it from inside and you can't kill it. But we can stop it. Bacteria, we already know, is like Staphylococcus aureus and E. coli. And remember, there's no such thing as good or bad bacteria. Did you guys ever hear that? Good bacteria, bad bacteria. If your colon doesn't have E. coli, it won't be able to process feces and it won't be able to absorb nutrients. So you need E. coli. But E. coli in the wrong place in the wrong number, you don't want it on your sandwich. Right? Then you get really, really sick. We've all been there, yes? Fungus. Right now, all of us have what? Fungus. Everywhere, especially on our feet. But what happens when you don't take care of yourself or you become immunocompromised? What happens to the fungus? It'll do what? It'll grow out of hand. And if you have a patient with fungal infection, think immunocompromised. Means their immune system is down and they can't defend itself. And last but not least, what's a parasite? A parasite is something that latches onto you, just like a virus, but it's much, much bigger. What's a classic? Ringworm. And they call it ringworm because the infection, it's not really a worm. The infection that it makes looks like a little ring on your skin, but it's a parasite. So what does it do? It's a bug. It's something that likes to take a piece of you, and it lives inside you. Here's a classic example. When I was working in Cambodia with the World Health Organization, I was working and helping out, some of my patients on their fish farm. The problem was, on the fish farm, they have these snails that the fish eat. The problem is the snails have these parasites that if you have a cut on your toe, it goes inside your blood, then runs through your blood and lays eggs in your lungs. It's called Loeffler syndrome. I just thought I had pneumonia. And then I saw the x-ray where I saw what in my right lung? I saw a bunch of worms. Now, you can only imagine. I felt like that lady in that movie, Prometheus, when she found out she had alien in her stomach. Anyone want aliens? No? I'm the only one who stayed up too late? Right? To this day, when I think about my right lung, I'm always like, right? But again, they took me to the hospital, a better hospital, not the one that was working in the jungle, because I was working with the World Health Organization. We were in an anti-TB, and where's the greatest amount of tuberculosis in very small, closed communities. So we were working that. And what are these things? They're parasites. They lived and breathed, and they had a nice little community here in my lung for a couple of weeks. And I just thought it was pneumonia. Silly me. So these things, you can have any and all these things inside you, but why are you not sick? Because your immune system keeps everything at bay. Oh, when I used to work in family medicine, urban care in Newark, we tested all the kids in outpatient for giggles. 30% of them had parasites in their feces from toddlers, because those of us who have children, toddlers, they're gross. They eat dirt, they play with it, they put it in their nether parts, because that's what children do. And dirt has what? Parasites in it. So when you look at your immune system, it has to be up and running, and it's protecting you at all times. But what happens when you're sick? What happens to your immune system? Down. What also happens when you're stressed out? What happens to your immune system? Goes down. What happens when you're emotional? Right? Do you ever notice, right, after something emotional happened, like for me, it's funerals. Because now I'm getting older, that's all I go to. Seems like every month, a friend of mine dies or whatever. Do you notice after the funeral, you got like a sore throat and you don't feel too good? Or, how's this? Maybe it was like 2-for-1 shot night, right? You had a couple, few minutes because what is alcohol? It's a depressant. Has initial effects of what? Woo! But then what happens? Right? It's depressant. And what are one of the things that it depresses? Immune system. So have you ever had beer bruises? Anybody? No? I'm the only fraternity boy in the room. You wake up and you're like, what happened? I didn't go fight. And you're like, why do I got? Because what happened to your immune system? What happened to your blood? It got thinned out. And your immune system got dropped. So then you got sick. Everyone's getting sick now, right? It's not the weather. Why are people in Texas getting sick? Why are people in Florida getting sick? It's like balmy 80 degrees over there, right? Because what? And those of you who had my lecture before know that what? What's February? Isn't this when we got all our bills? Also, we got our W-2s, so now we all got to pay taxes. That's fun. I'm not looking at mine because it's getting me, just looking at the envelopes making me angry. Right? And then on top of that, because also socially, it's what it's the weather isn't so hot, so you don't see your friends as much. And also, for those of you, it's also Single Awareness Day coming up, which is, you know, for most people, holidays are what? They're very lonely. Even if you have a family, those of us have big families, don't you feel, sometimes I feel alone. I could be in a room full of 30 people. I hate them all, and I don't want to be there, right? But I love them, but hate them at the same time. And then what will it do? That's why we all get sick during the holidays, because of stress. And now you can see that stress, external factors, there are a multitude of factors that affect your immune system. So we have lymphatic vessels. Wherever you have an artery, vein, or nerve, you also have a lymphatic vessel. And inside that lymphatic vessel, it kind of looks like a vein. It's thin, it's low, relatively low pressure, and just like a vein, it also has valves. So if it's low pressure, don't you think we don't want any backflow of fluid, yes? So it has lymph fluid in there. And the lymph fluid, guess what it looks like? It looks just like plasma. All right, there's some Illuminati stuff coming up. When you think about every tunnel, or it goes every tube that ever was created in the world, isn't there also a service tube? Like when you go underneath a tunnel, right? There's tunnels that are right next to it that you don't see. Just like the human body, we already know the stars, arteries and veins, right? Arteries go away from the heart, veins come back. But in between all of that are lymphatic vessels for a couple of reasons. And the lymphatic fluid looks just like the plasma, but doesn't have plasma proteins in it. So I don't have to check my lymph fluid for the proteins, but it's going to act just like the water, so or the plasma in your blood. Now, remember we talked about homeostasis? Do you think there's going to be times I'm going to have too much plasma? Yeah. Right? Do you think there's going to be times I don't have enough plasma? Yeah. Where do you think all the excess plasma goes? It goes into your lymphatic system. So put that down as something important. Your lymphatic vessels, function number one, it prevents edema. It prevents overflow of excess water. Anyone have edema here? You get cankles, right? You get your ankles get like those of you, especially if you work like a CNA job or a job that you stand up a lot. Or how's this? Go see grandma and grandpa. Take a good look at their feet, right? It's like kind of blown up. And then when you press on it, it's like dough. That's edema. Now, if the edema's down here, maybe in the fingers and in the toes and your ankles, right? It's, what do you call it? It's gravity dependent. That's one thing. But do you think this edema, this extra fluid, can get in my lungs? And then you'll get pulmonary edema? Do you think some of this extra fluid may get into my heart? I can have cardiac edema, and you have a nice little trip to the ER if you have any of that. And who prevents that? It is this lymphatic system that has this extra set of tubing that if the arteries and veins get too much fluid, what will it do? It will draw all that excess fluid out. So that's one thing. Now, the next thing is, right, we already have a pathway. Remember, arteries go away, veins come back. Let's say, for example, we already know about diapedesis, that the white blood cells step out and go to bad places because it gets chemically attracted. So let's say, for example, that Purell thing back there, that's a pathogen. That's a bad thing, right? Now, there's arteries and veins, and there's traffic on these arteries and veins. What's better, the main road or some side road to get to that bad thing? So I have artery going up, vein going down. I got these extra roads called your lymphatic vessels. So traffic's going this slow on my artery, but now I got a straight shot to who? I got a straight shot to this. I killed that, right? I got my white blood cells to get to go where they need to. Don't you think that's neat? Right? And that's what your lymph vessels can do. Now, those of us who watch history movies or war movies know that the enemy can also use the same roads that we use, can't they? Right? So let's say that Purell thing is cancer. Do you think that thing is going to go inside the lymph vessel and then start traveling around? You betcha. Because if I can use this road, who else can use this road? Cancer, pathogens, anything. Right? So that's why, ladies, and also gentlemen as well, do your regular monthly breast self-examination. Do your BSE. When do I need, and especially when you look at, there's no masses here, right? Oh man, I'm developing a lot of breast tissue. It's way too much breast tissue for a man. All right. Now, you see how systematically I'm checking from my areola out, but what else do I have to check? The axillary lymph nodes, because they are connected to lymph vessels that might have cancer, right? How many times that outpatient came to me, right? I'm doing obstetrics and gynecology, so of course, I take the history of my patient. Oh, my mom had breast cancer. Oh, she survived it. Okay, well and good. How about you? No, I check my breast here. And then I go, okay, we'll do an examination. I check the breast, nothing here. I ask her to sit up straight, hold the arm like this. Hook this. Go, oh, that's a lump. It just comes by every once in a while. Then we did what? Biopsy. Guess what? It's cancer. Well, we saw cancer when? Before it became an actual tumor. Don't you think that was a better thing? We caught it way before, right? And because we know that lymph vessels also can carry bad things. And we know that the lymph vessels also have lymph nodes. Look at this. Before we go to lymphocytes. See this? Those of you who are sick, what do you do? Then you do this. Then you're like, oh, come on. See, every class I do this, I always find active lymph nodes. There's not supposed to be anything here. Well, sometimes I found, but that's lower respiratory. But what am I finding here in my cervical chain? I'm finding a little knot here. Oh, damn it, here's another one. Now, what does that mean? Remember my white blood cells? Those are my troopers, right? They're going to fight infection. And what are these lymph nodes? So these lymph nodes are like, if any of you know any military terms, it's a FOB, the forward operating base. So let's say that's my enemy, right? I'm thinking of the Purell. The Purell is cancer. Do I want my white blood cells to travel all the way from here, all the way there, or can I be at this base that's here, and then fill up this base with white blood cells and then attack that from here? It's better. That's why we have forward operating bases in the world, right? Because if we had to start the attack from Virginia, that's too far. So that's where all the lymph node is. And that's the reason why the clinician is feeling you up, right? We're not doing it for fun. I actually don't want to touch it, but I have to because if I have an infection up here, what will the lymph nodes say? Oh, there's a lump. If I have a UTI, that's why the doctor's tickling you down here. Not because I want a lawsuit. Because I have my inguinal lymph nodes here. So if you have a UTI, that means they're gonna light up. And if both sides light up, that means what? I got a problem on not one side, but two sides. So you can see how these lymph nodes, and actually, doesn't it look like a rosary chain for the Christians in the room? That's actually, and it loops down like this, and that's actually why they call it the lymphatic chain. Because lymphatic means what? Rosary. Right? But you can see here. So let's say that arrow is where the trouble is. I don't want to send white blood cells all the way from here to all the way over there. I got what? Troopers right. Where? Where I need it. And that's what lymph nodes are. And that's why if you have lymphadenopathy, pathy meaning disease, that means what? That lymph node lit up. And it's important. Let's go back because I have to talk about these things. Now, lymphocytes, B cells and T cells. Now, T cells, they're called, well, B cells are called humoral, T cells are called cellular immunity. Now, remember we mentioned briefly in the last lecture that B cells are memory. Because you know when you get sick, the B cells make antibodies and it remembers. Now, what's T cells? We're going to talk more about that, but those are all lymphocytes. Remember lymphocytes and monocytes? Those are agranulocytes. So these two are very, very important in adaptive immunity. So that means this has to be exposed to something. You're not born with this. Of course, lymphoid tissue, lymphoid organ, we're going to talk about in a minute. So the next thing, of course, is these lymph nodes. We already now talked about that. Where is home base for these lymph nodes? Remember, we have a forward operating base. You have to have what? An HQ, right? You have to have the main place where you're going to get all your lymph fluid and all your white blood cells. And that's, and of course, what are we trying to prevent? Edema, right? If we, the lymphatic ducts, the lymphatic vessels is going to drain all the excess fluid from our arteries and veins. So where's home base? Here. The thoracic duct and the cisterna chyli. So you can see how important lymph nodes are, because if this is home base, and let's say I have a sore throat, I'm going to send lymph fluid and white blood cells all the way from down here, all the way up. It doesn't seem efficient. But if I had a forward operating base, right, that's right there, then it'll attack what it needs to attack. And I can then fortify, then get more troops up there, and that's the reason why when you feel it, especially right here on my left, right, that means there must be an infection going on somewhere here, and my white blood cells are going what? They're stocking up. They're doing battle. And each lymph node has all the white blood cell differential inside it. So it has what? Neutrophils, eosinophils, it has everybody. Just like any forward unit, right? Right? You guys don't mind my military analogies? No, right? Well, just like a house is, let's make a hospital analogy. Just like every hospital has what? Every specialty underneath the roof, because you got to get ready for it, right? You can't just have surgery, you have to have internal medicine, you have to have radiology, you have to have everyone together. So in each and one of these lymph nodes, it's everybody. God bless. All right, let's talk about B cells versus T cells. Now, B cells, of course, antibodies, and they're, when it makes an antibody, it's called a plasma cell. Now, what's a T cell? You have two types. You have T helper, also known as a CD4 plus cell, and a cytotoxic T cell, which is a CD8 cell. And then you have NK cells, those are natural killers. So I'm going to tell it like a story. Let me pick on another pathogen. Let me pick on this garbage can. This garbage can is a bacteria. There's too many of them, right? Now, remember we talked about macrophages? They're thugs, right? Your bouncer. I'm sorry if any of your family members are bouncers. I'm just playing on a stereotype for the analogy. The bouncer, the thug, right? Typically in stereotypical movies, are they smart? So your macrophage, not smart. Your natural killer cell, they're not smart, but they're big. Also your cytotoxic T cell or CD8 cell. CD8 and then a little plus. They're thugs. They can only phagocytose or beat this guy up if someone tells them to. And who's that somebody? That's the CD4 plus cell, that's your T helper cell. And what do? I call the T helper cell the tattletale cell. So this is what it does. It sees it, the T helper cell, right? Monitors, looks around, everyone's cool, I like you, I like it, wait, hold up, latches onto it chemically, and then chemically it releases a whole bunch of immunoglobulins, which we're going to talk about. And what will that do? It's like a whistle. Then, who hears it? Macrophage, monocyte turns into macrophage, right? David Banner, it hulks out, bad thing, right? And then does what? Then natural killer cell goes, hey, what up? Something bad? And you know, those of you who have friends, you see your one friend beating up with somebody on the club, what does your other friend do? They don't care who's at fault. What do? They just jump right in, don't they? Then, who else? I have now my cytotoxic T cell, right? Then I have my natural killer cell, macrophage. Who else is another thug? Natural killer, right? Natural killer, doesn't it sound like very like thuggy thing? Like that boy's named Natural Killer, or that girl, never know. Had a couple of, been doing clubs and stuff for 30 years, and the most vicious fights I've ever seen with women. But that's beside the story. So they all do what? Phagocytose. And the only reason why they did it, because what? The T helper went, hey, guys, bad thing. Now, where have we heard CD4 plus cell or T helper cell? Didn't we hear that in AIDS? HIV, remember that nasty virus? HIV loves T helper cells. They go inside and they kill T helper cells because they want to make more HIV, right? They want to make more viruses. But in the process, they kill the T helper cell. So now you have no one to tattle. So when this thing starts floating around, right, which normally would get taken care of, macrophage goes, natural killer would just walk right by it. The T cytotoxic cell will look at it and walk right by it. And then what will happen with this bacteria, this pathogenic bacteria goes unchecked, what will happen? Grow, and then what happens? You have a massive infection. If you have a massive infection that's in your blood, septicemia, you get to die. That's why I said 250 things here that could kill you, but it doesn't because you have a T helper that will tattle. T cytotoxic cell that will phagocytose cells. Natural killer cells will attack and destroy all these foreign cells because the T helper told it to. And the monocyte, remember the little monocyte, David Banner, turns into what? Hulks out, turns into the Hulk, and turns into a macrophage. Macro means big, phage means eat, and it'll eat up all these things. Now, the T helper cell does even more than that. That's why HIV and AIDS is so devastating. T helper cell is also lazy. So after the T helper cell, goes, hey guys, kill this. The T helper cell then tells the B cell, hey, remember this. It's gray, it's got a plastic. Hey, B cell, hey, remember this. And then the B cells do what? Turn into a plasma cell and then make antibodies against this so that the T helper doesn't have to attack this anymore. So isn't it kind of a horrifying coincidence that the HIV attacked the one thing that was the kingpin that held your entire immune system? That's why when you have HIV or HTLV, it is devastating to your immune system. You have now a whole bunch of things that can't do its job because the one thing is now missing. And that's why when we have our patient on meds, we're looking at their CD4 count or their T helper count. Because if it gets a little higher, that means what? It didn't help you. If it drops a little lower, then we have to do what? We have to do something. And B cells, of course, turn into plasma cells. And this is how I remember it. Lowercase b looks like this. What happens when you turn it upside down? It turns into a P. And they're in plasma. And they make antibodies. Where do I find antibodies? Where do I find immunoglobulins? Immune protein. That Y thing we're about to show, that's what? An antibody. And I'm going to find it where? In plasma. And of course, NK. Oh, the neat thing about NK cells is they're thugs, but they love viruses and cancer, right? But again, they will not attack unless directed to. Now, remember who was that? That was our T helper cell, our tattletailer, right? CD4 plus cell. And that CD4 plus cell is called an antigen presenting cell. What's it doing? It's reminding everybody that the coat of this bad thing is not welcome in this house. Now you know exactly why HIV is devastating. And but we have ways around it. We have workarounds. You'll learn later. But you could see how, especially when we didn't know much about it in the late 80s, early 90s, how we were kind of really scared about it. Oh. Okay. So, forward. Now, remember when we talked about, like I said, there's a lot of bacteria. There's no such thing as good bacteria or bad bacteria, only bacteria in the wrong place and in the wrong number. Well, there's tons of bacteria in your intestines because you need them to make vitamins. You also need them for nutrient absorption. So those are the quote unquote good the good bacteria. You know, when they say to eat and drink probiotics, pro means what? In favor of bio life or bacterial life. Well, in order to keep all that bacteria in check, because remember, I don't want the E. coli to go out of hand, I have mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue. And we also know the function of your mucus. It's sticky and it traps things, right? It can trap all the pathogens. It's the reason why your nose and the inside lining, epithelial lining of your nose and your mouth and your throat and your lungs has to be sticky and moist. So I have mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. So wherever there's mucus, there's got to be lymphatic tissue because the mucus traps a lot of garbage. So we need to have something that will kill it. And one example is in your small intestine, and they're called Peyer's patches. And here's a picture of them right here. They're actually little patches of lymphoid. Don't they even look like mucus? But what's in them? Your malt is the same stuff that your lymph fluid and all that is made up as well. So they have extra white blood cells there just in case there's any trouble. Again, Peyer's patches, think small intestine. Now, how do I know this is my small intestine? If you look at it, the diameter of it doesn't look too thick, but that could also be deceptive. How you can really tell your small intestine from your large intestine, the large intestine, of course, has a larger diameter. And if you look at the large intestine, it kind of looks like feces because your large intestine has these outpocketings called haustra. So that's what is like the Play-Doh mold of your feces. And by the way, those of us who are going to be clinicians in this room, you got to look at that. Actually, there's this wonderful presentation. I really wish I still taught MA and LP and other stuff. I have this lovely, it's just 30 minutes on the different kinds of diarrhea and the different kinds of feces. And it's really important because in your small intestines, I have to keep all of that bacteria in check, right? So think small intestines, Peyer's patches. Now, those of you who are going to be dental, I mentioned the first day, what is the nastiest place on your body? It is not your anus, it is your mouth and your pharynx, your throat. So your oropharynx and your mouth up here has, again, remember those 250 things that can kill you? Well, there's 250 things that also can kill you, but now there's 250 different things, and they're all where? They're all here, right? So whoever built us, right, whatever higher power you believe in, or space aliens, right? You know how they always say the space aliens built the pyramids? Well, they could have built you, who knows, right? Tonsils, they're all where? in your oropharynx. Your tonsils up here, tonsils down here, tonsils underneath here. Now, what are they? They are lymphatic tissue, just like your lymph vessels. They have a whole bunch of white blood cells in there because there's a lot of dirty things. And last but not least, your appendix. Your appendix is what they call a vestigial organ. It used to be part of malt, but now it's kind of like your earlobes. Your earlobes serve no real purpose except holding up your glasses and giving you beautiful earrings. How do we know? Burn victims or people who've been in auto accidents that had avulsions of their ear, your hearing doesn't go bad if I chop this off. So all the people like Van Gogh, remember Van Gogh? Speaking of Lonely Hearts Club Month, right? He got really depressed over some girl and then lopped off his ear. Well, it should not have affected his hearing because this is a vestigial organ. Meaning what? Don't really need it, but it's there. Appendix, you don't really need it, but it's there. But the problem is, if you get a really hard piece of feces or a peanut that's lodged in your appendix, and yes, I said peanut, right? Don't you think we can have appendicitis? I have appendicitis, this thing bursts, and then don't you think all the E. coli that's all in your stomach now, in your intestines, are now in your what? In your abdomen floating around, and that's a problem. So malt, Hayes patches, small intestine, tonsils where? Here, if you guys remember the Brady Bunch, okay? Remember when Bobby got his tonsils? No? Too much of a 70s reference? Sorry about that. And you can see here, look at your tonsils. They're all where? All here in the oropharynx, right? Oral cavity, and here's your pharyngeal cavity, even up here in your nasal cavity. And their function is what? Lymphoid function. Because there's 250 other things that can really do damage. And by the way, plaque now promotes certain bacteria that gives us heart disease, even if you have no history of heart disease. So that's a problem, don't you think? Right? So you can now see why tonsils are needed. So whoever, like I always say, whoever you believe built us pretty damn perfect. There's a lot of cool things about us. But of course, if you do not take care of it, it will take care of you. And here's your appendix. You see the large intestine? You see how it has pockets? And those pockets are called haustra. And you see this line of smooth muscle here? Right? And then it connects to your appendix, which is right here. And it's called the veriform appendix. It is vestigial. You don't really need it. So if you do an appendectomy, I take it out. It should not affect any of your gastrointestinal things, but it's there. But you can only imagine. Small intestines deal with absorption. Large intestines deal with the absorption of water and the creation of feces. And look, doesn't poop look like this? It's got those sections, and those sections are called haustra. Now, this absorbs things, this thing makes feces. So there's a door here, and that's called your ileocecal valve, right? So you want the poops to stay where? Here. And you want the nutrients to stay in here. So that's why, and we're going to talk more about that in the GI system, the valves. But you can now easily see that if this thing gets inflamed, infected, and then bursts, what will happen to all the feces now? Will it stay here? No, it'll do this. It'll spread. It'll spread into the covering of your abdomen called the peritoneum. You'll get peritonitis. Your peritoneum has a lot of arteries, veins, and lymphatics. So where's all the infection now going to go? Everywhere. Peritonitis turns into septicemia. Septicemia turns into death in a couple of hours. All because of what? Thing no bigger than the tip of my pinky finger. And it caused all that trouble. Shoot.
People got tonsils are needed. So what happens to people like
who get them removed? Well, we get them removed because it's not doing its job. Like it got overwhelmed, right? So we have to, of course, remove them. And if we remove them, then we have to now, of course, we put that in the history, and we have to now make sure that if the patient's going through any oral surgery or anything like that, anything going up here, you have to pay attention, right? It's the same thing like for for breast cancer, we not only take the breast out, we have to take what? All the lymph nodes out. So what do we then have to pay attention? All the things that the lymph nodes were doing before, we now have to pay attention a little bit better where? Because now it becomes a deficiency.
And then my second question is it's kind of off topic, but I know that tonsils, if they don't get fully removed, they can go back and regenerate. Is that the same?
Yeah, tonsils and a lymphatic tissue or tissue in general. Who do we typically do a tonsillectomy on? We do it to kids, right? And kids, children, especially when they're really small, like 3 and 2 years old, they have wonderful regenerative properties. Actually, a 2-year-old, if they amputate their fingers from the distal phalange, many of them will grow back, they'll grow the distal part of their bone back, right? But if that happened to an adult, Humvee fell on my hand. Does this look like it's growing back nicely? Nope. Right? So, right, what happens? When you get older, the cells get more solidified. But remember those blast cells, those pluripotent cells? Hematocytoblasts, they're what? They can be anything, right? And they're only present with what? Fetal tissue and with babies. Did I answer your question? How things go back? But when you're solid, when you get more adult, it's more what? You're already more solidified. And that's why we have to do surgeries and all these other things. And that's also the reason why many times in surgery and of course medical management, we wait until the child is like 5, 6 years old because we want to have the child to get to a certain level of development. And that's intestines. Lymph nodes we already talked about. Let's talk about the spleen. Well, let's talk about lymph node first. Remember I told you that the lymph node was a forward operating base. If it's a forward operating base, that means it has what? It has a complete crew, right? Because you don't want to stick, a crew out there with minimal support, right? Marine Corps loves their MAGTF. Anyone know what a Marine Corps MAGTF is? It's a Marine Air Ground Task Force. It's about 44,000 Marines, and it is a small war machine, meaning it can do everything. It can fly, it can go on the water, it can go on land, it can do anything. That's what this is. This is your Air Ground Task Force, but this is your forward operating base. And what has it? It has everything. Does it have thugs? Tattletales? Memory cells? Nope, has everything. And B cell daycare. Meaning, what's it doing to my B cells? They're developing it, right? So that they become plasma cells. Because if I see a bad thing right over here, don't you think the rest of my body needs those antibodies? Right? I'm not only fighting the bad thing here. I'm eventually going to fight that bad thing where? Everywhere. So in each lymph node, you have a set of B cells. And the B cells, they start connecting, and then they start communicating with the rest of the immune system. So I get infected up here. Can that same infection mess with my big toe? It could. But my antibodies now are where? Being made. So if something invades me in what? My big toe, my B cells, my memory cells will remember it. Now, what is it? What's a germinal center? If you look at these things, you see it's like in groups. And remember what well, why am I saying remember? That's a different class. You guys learn in obstetrics that the germ layer is the layer that makes us who we are. Right? Ectoderm makes our skin and our nervous system. So it goes back to those blast cells. All these little things, these little pockets here, they're little daycares. They're growing B cells, baby T cells. They're growing, they're storing monocytes. Because when I release monocytes to the world, what will they do? They'll hulk out and become macrophages. And that's my thugs. So you can see here that this thing has already, and look, it has to be associated with an artery and vein, right? You have your vessels here. And if ever you see these words, efferent and afferent, efferent, remember if you have two things that sound alike, memorize one like your life depended on it. An efferent vessel is something that exits something. So if you have efferent nerves, that means it's what? Exiting the brain. Efferent lymph vessels are doing what? They're exiting the lymph node, right? So let's say, for example, there's trouble over here, okay? right? More white blood cells will come in here. This thing will get bigger. Why? Because right here, right next door is what? An insurgency, a pathogen. I want to get rid of it. So I have to grow my factories. I got to get my soldiers in line. I got to mature them. Then they send them out to the efferent, and they come here to do phagocytosis, do inflammation, and then they take business. And then today, we're going to finally find out what itis really means. It's so easy, right? What's itis? Inflammation. So what does that mean? Inflammation or infection. What does that mean? And today, we're going to be talking about how does this help. So the lymph node, you can see, it's an air-ground task force. It has everybody, got all the troops, and it even has baby troops, right? Germinal centers. It's growing B cells to become plasma cells, so they're getting ready. And in wartime, it's going to happen to the base. It's big. But then if there's no infection, like on this side, I don't feel anything. The base will do what? Shrink, right? That's what happened. Next, thymus. Thymus is located in your mediastinum. That means it's in your chest, right? Posterior to the sternum. Your sternum is here, your breastbone. So you ever feel this notch out here? I just look at the sternum like it's a tie. Like you got a body and you have this thing, the knot right here, the winter knot here is called the manubrium. You feel underneath here, right? There's a notch right here. Right behind it, that's your thymus. Now, remember thymus, T cells. So who makes T cells? Thymus, right? So the thymus makes T cells, but here's the funny part. T cells only get made and mature, right? The maximum potential when you're in puberty. After that, it's all downhill. So what does that mean? And of course, the hormone is thymosin, right, to make it grow. So what does that mean? After your 20s, what happens to your susceptibility to disease? Right? I remember when I was in my 20s, I was a smoker, I was a drinker, I get bronchitis on Tuesday, it goes away by Friday, and then I do what? Do something else stupid. Now, I get bronchitis, it's for 3 months. I get to visit the hospital during those 3 months. Because what happened to my T cells over time? They matured, I maxed out around in my teens and my early 20s, and then what happens over time? So, your thymus makes T cells. It's in your, right here, right behind your thigh, or right behind your sternum, and they secrete a hormone called thymosin. Now, your spleen. Spleen's here on the left side. It's kind of like behind your stomach. And what does it do? Remember we talked about erythropoietin and the red blood cells after 120 days, your liver and your kidneys filter out old 120-day red blood cells. Well, what does the spleen do? It does the same thing. It will start filtering out red blood cells, old red blood cells. And here's what's neat. It can also make some more through its red pulp. It also has white pulp, which can also make more white blood cells. So it's kind of like a backup to your bone. Because remember your red marrow, your bone, they do hematopoiesis, so your spleen's a backup. Another thing they don't mention in here is your spleen is also part of your cardiovascular system because it can hold anywhere from 100 to 120 cc's of extra blood. So let's say, boom, 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 I got shot in the chest, about 400 cc's of blood is now on the floor. What's going to happen to my spleen? It's going to start squeezing to give me an extra 100 so I can make it to the hospital. Right? And that does, so those are the two functions of your spleen. One, it recycles and makes red blood cells and white blood cells, right? It filters them out and recycles them, right? And then it's also as a backup real thing of blood, right? That can provide if you go into, your patient starts going into shock and starts running out of blood. Okay, and it's up here, left side, a little bit behind your stomach. Okay, so it's an accessory organ. your thymus, an accessory organ, right? Your spleen, an accessory organ. That means we can lose them. So if you have a thymoma or some sort of cancer here in your thymus, you can remove your thymus. But like I stated, if I remove something that has a vital function, what must we do? We have to pay attention to what, like for example, it's kind of like having HIV if I remove your thymus, especially if you're a younger person. So I have to pay attention to infection. If I remove your spleen, I also have to then do what? Pay attention to old and dated red blood cells and white blood cells. Now, immunity. Let's get specific. Right? We said immunity is what? Protection against food, pathogens. But there's different kinds. So let's talk about there's innate and there's adaptive. Doesn't this look like I'll give you a story, and is it innate or is it adaptive? Is it non-specific or is it specific? So look at this as like two different columns. So innate means what? You're born with. So what were you born with? When you born with mucus, hair, skin, and some white blood cells? Can we contend with that? Yes. So all of these are non-specific immunity. But that means this baby has little to no real protection. That's why I always cringe when I see newborns in the mall. What are you thinking? I saw one yesterday. I was coming out of the gym and she was like walking around with like maybe 5, 6 days old. What are you doing? You're now exposing baby before baby has a chance to do what? Develop any immunity. Because the only thing that's protecting baby is what? This. It's innate. It's non-specific. Now, adaptive, right? That's why during the pandemic, there were a lot of medical professionals that were voting, hey, let's bring the kids back into school, because those of us who have children, where do the kids pick up all their nastiness? Right? They pick up all of it in school, all of it, because they have adaptive specific immunity, because there are other dirty little snot-ridden kids all over school. So that means they acquired it. Now, one or two ways. You either acquire it actively. Now, what does active mean? Because active means that I got sick, I built antibodies, and now I recovered. So that the next time, my antibodies will take care of whatever attacked me. That's active. Now, what's passive? What must the children have before they go to school? That little immunization card, yes? So what are we doing when we immunize the child or immunize the adult? I'm giving them the coat. Remember the antigen? Do I give them the whole disease? No, because they'll get sick. But if I just give them the coat, what can the T cells now do? They go, oh, anytime I see this tie, anytime I see this man-tailored shirt, we will do business. Right? And that's why the vaccines are important. So think vaccine, right, is artificial. It's passive. If I got sick because I got exposed to other kids who are also sick, that's active and that's natural. What's another adaptive that's also passive and also natural? What do we always promote to mommy? What's the first milk called? You guys remember any mommies?
What is it?
What's the first milk?
Colostrum.
Colostrum, right? Colostrum is full of mommy's antibodies. And mommy gave it naturally, but she gave it passively. Because did the baby get sick? And that's why, even if the mommy is not planning to breastfeed, we always, hey, mommy, just this first time, or just these first couple of days. Because I can simulate everything in that milk except what? Mommy's antibodies. So right now, right here, doesn't this look like a beautiful set of questions? I could ask, innate or adaptive? Skin, innate, non-specific. Mucus, non-specific. White blood cell differential, non-specific. Because I was born with blood, yes? But that's all non-specific. But then, when we talk about adaptive or specific, The patient got sick. So did it happen actively or passively? They got sick. They got active, right? And it was what? Natural, right? You got exposed and you naturally got sick. My patient was given a vaccine. So did they actually get sick? Actively get sick? No, it's passive. And the vaccine was what? Human made. So that's artificial. Another scenario is what? The mommy gave it through breastfeeding, through her colostrum, right? That's passive, because the baby didn't get sick, and it was natural. Now, do you think you can make a question like that at home? Now you have all the possibilities of this kind of question. Could you ever be fooled by this question going forward? No, if you train it and you practice it, there's no way you can get fooled. And this is a concept thing where it's what? Either this or this, right? Remember those kind of questions that we all love to hate? Is it A? Is it B? Is it both A and B? Or is it none of the above? Can it ever be both? No, there's only one side, there's another side. So that's not an answer. And we already know T cells and B cells. You have to get exposed to something, and then the B cells can make antibodies, and then the T cells can do what? They'll react, and then tell the B cells, hey, go make me some more antibodies. That's adaptive. So this is more advanced. This is what? Non-specific happens to you when you were born. Now, I want you to include this into your notes in innate non-specific inflammation. And we're going to talk about what inflammation is. So for example, please don't do this for newborns. If I took one of my kids, newborn, right? Came right into the world. They have all this. If I scratched my kid like this, what do you think would happen? Don't you think it will turn red and be a little puffy? That's inflammation, isn't it? And that happened when? As a protective function of me doing this. Because the second I did that, what am I now doing? I'm digging up the upper layers of skin. The lower layers of skin are now detecting what? Some sort of break. So it will react to it. Anyone ever have like it's not too deep of a scratch? Maybe you caught something like on the side of a door or whatever, and it just had a scratch, and then you notice later it's red and then it's a little bit puffy, right? Or maybe you got pets, also known as children, who scratch you a little bit, right? And then you're like, oh man, right? There's some redness, that's inflammation, that's innate. That happened non-specifically, right? But all this, these are specific situations, okay? White blood cell, we already know this. Granulocytes or agranulocytes. Here's a lovely thing right here, right? That gives a nice little summary. I'm not going to go over that because we know and all of that. Present at birth, physical barriers, phagocytosis, immunologic surveillance. Remember we talked about the T cells? What do the T helpers do? They walk around, they look around for trouble. Hey, there's trouble. Then they'll tattle. That's what immunologic surveillance is. Your white blood cells are just floating around. Macrophages, natural killer cells, they're floating around ready for what? Ready to pounce on somebody, but someone has to tell them to go pounce on them. Inflammation is also what? Innate, non-specific. And you can see here, this is why all of this, including this hair, has a lot of nasty things in it. So whoever built us pretty darn smart. Did you see how many layers of skin do we have? Got a ton. Because I don't want whatever's out there to get into here. And when it gets inside, who do I have? I have all my non-specific people deal with it. A monocyte will turn into a macrophage. Look at how small this monocyte is. And then what happens? Blew up, and then this thing will take over. Another macrophage. Now remember, I told you about chemotaxis and how tattletale and chemicals. See this? The cytokine? There's a whole bunch of different kinds of cytokines, but these are chemicals that say what? Hey, trouble here, go here. Did you ever wonder, like, how does inflammation or infection, how does the white blood cell know where to go? Well, it knows where to go because it's chemotaxis. The bad thing is going to let off a chemical stink, right? And the tattletale is going to let off, the T helper is going to let off a chemical stink. And then what's going to do? It's going to attract all these troopers, and all these troopers are going to do what? They're gonna do business. And see how difficult it is for the pathogen to get by the layers? So the function is before it gets to this blood. The problem is, see this pathogen, whatever it may be, if it gets in your blood, how much trouble am I in? You have not septicemia. And that, don't you think that's something we should prevent? And you can see there's a whole bunch of barrier. Why do you think in surgery we shave you? There's a lot of dirt here. There's a lot of. Remember I told you about those dermatophytes? When I found out about dermatophytes, it freaked the hell out of me. I didn't even want to touch my hair for a month. And I was like constantly washing it. But no matter what you do, those little buggies live and breathe inside hair. And it's horrifying. Look them up. Skin, hair, exocrine glands. Now, mucus, we already know mucus traps things. We know that's a physical barrier, it's innate. What's an exocrine gland? Exo means what? Out. You guys ever notice you go to the bar, but you didn't have anything to drink, right? And you didn't smoke none. And by smoke none means what? You just smelled the herb. But you were there, but you didn't touch nothing, right? Go home. Even if even after you took the shower, right? What do your clothes smell like? It smells like alcohol and weed. You didn't do anything, right? Like I told you, I have a production company. Every weekend I'm in some sort of bar, right? And even before it was legal, I come home, my wife always gets at me, "You stink." And I go, "No, I don't." Right? And then I take off my clothes and then smell my jacket. What do I smell? I smell alcohol and weed. What they give you? I give every Friday, Saturday. But what happened? If you breathe all this stuff in, what happens? Your skin will do what? Filter it. And that's your sweat. You ever notice, like, if you had something really spicy, like, oh, I love curry. I had Japanese curry the other day. What immediately came out of my pores, out of my sweat, smelled like what? Curry. And I smelled spicy. Well, to my family, I stunk. They're like, what did you eat? You stink. And I'm like, just have some Japanese curry. I'll brush my teeth. He goes, no, it's not your teeth. And he goes, it's your butt. And I go, oh. And then I smell my clothes. And you know when it's on you, doesn't. So I put it in the hamper. Then I did laundry later that day. I picked up my clothes that I wore earlier that day. I went, ooh, it's pungent. Right? Because why? Exocrine glands. And that's also how you know alcohol is a poison. Because your body wouldn't filter it out if it didn't like it. It's a very tasty poison, but a poison nevertheless. And that's why your body wants to go get rid of it, even if you just smell it. And it's the same thing for smoke and whatnot. So those are all physical barriers. So if you don't have very good skin and you're not sweating properly, don't you think that's going to be a problem? Yeah. Neutrophils, we already talked about, they're the most prolific. They're your PMNs, polymorphonucleocytes, and PMNs, phagocytic. They are the first responder because the neutrophils are, I think I always go neutrophil number one, right? So they're the number one on site because they're the most of them. Macrophage, we already know they're what? Thugs. They're big. They're brutal. And they do phagocytosis. Now, let's talk about inflammation. You could sit and try to memorize all of this, and for those of you who had me for medical terms, please bear with me because I do this lecture all the time. Oh, how's this? I'll ask the medical term people. He goes, what was the story that I told for inflammation? 2 words, begins with a B. What do we all have in the summertime? Mosquitoes? Well, sunburn. Well, I live in my bug bites, right? So when you think about a bug bite, now this goes back to my thing about how to memorize things. The reason why a lot of people have trouble with memorization is because you sit here and you try to memorize somebody else's list. How's this? Memorize your own list. And the best way to deal with inflammation is bug bite. So let's go over just conceptually, what does a bug bite look like? We know that a bug bite is what? Itchy, right? And itchy, if it gets out of hand, it becomes painful, doesn't it? And it's also red, You see a little bump, right? And when you feel it, doesn't it feel warm? And on top of it, if you get a bug bite right here, can you move your finger very well? No, you can't because of the swelling. Now, if you extrapolate that to the 5 cardinal signs and symptoms of bug bites, I mean, not bug bites, but inflammation is what? Is it redness, also known as rubor? Isn't it swelling, also known as tumor, lump or bump? Isn't it also pain, known as dolor, right? And those of you who speak Spanish, it looks a little bit familiar because it is Latin, right? And then I mentioned itching, right? Itching, pain, and of course, isn't anything with an itis warm? Because you have a lot of blood rushing to that area, like we saw there with our infection, because all the white blood cells need to go there, and the white blood cells aren't cold, they're warm. So it's going to get all swelled up and it's going to get warm. And last but not least, does my finger work? No, and that's functionalisia or loss of function. So when you look at that, redness, swelling, heat, pain, right? That's the 4 plus loss of function. So let's talk about medical terminology. If I have dermatitis, is it a big deal? Am I going to the ER? If I have redness, swelling, heat, and pain, and loss of function, and a little patch on my skin? No. You know, people go to my ER all the time for that, and I look at them like, are you freaking kidding me? Right? But then, right next to it, I got your grandma who has carditis. Carditis is what? Itis, inflammation, infection, which is this. Now of what? The heart. Now how serious is this? It's very serious. She now has chest pain. Her area in the medium sinus will be warm with swelling. The heart chambers that we saw, do you think it's a good idea for any of that to get swelled up? And the nastiest part that we know is what? Functionalisia. The function of my heart is to pump the blood. Now we have a function problem. So now you can see carditis is very scary, isn't it? Now you know exactly what it means. So when you explain inflammation to a patient, you tell them it's what? It's the body's reaction to some sort of infection, and this is its reaction. It's red because blood has to go there to fight the infection. It swells up because, think about it, if I have trouble here, do I want the trouble to spread? No. So if I gum up the area and make all the area edematous, right, has a lot of fluid, you think now all the trouble can't go anywhere. Let's look at that. I mentioned it because let's look at pictures. So do you see how this is swollen and it's red? Now a lot of blood's going to go through here. It's going to get warm. So I want to contain these little droplets. Why did they make them look like sperm? Okay, sperm in your skin. Who cares, right? When it's here, don't you think I want the swelling to keep all of this where? Here. Makes sense. And that's what inflammation and infection is. That's what it actually means. And this is a beautiful picture of it. Okay? And who's involved? Everybody. And don't you think there's going to be cytokines and immunoglobulins that I'm going to pick up in my plasma to tell me how bad my inflammation is? Don't you think I'm going to do a white blood cell differential so I know how bad my inflammation is? So you see, even though this is just basic anatomy physiology, there's so many connections to real world clinical stuff. Now, fever. Greater than 37.2, right? Oh, well, I was saying it was 37. Okay, 37.2 or 99 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, remember, the foreign body, especially the bacteria, loves 98.6. It loves a nice, even temperature. So what happens when there's infection? Your brain releases interleukin-1, which is, of course, an immunoglobulin, and it's a protein that tells your hypothalamus, hey, turn up the heat. I want all the bad things in the house to get burned. And that's what it does. So having a low-grade fever of 99 and a little under 100 is a good thing. So those of us who have children and family members, don't get Tylenol immediately. If it's 99, 99.1, 99.2, don't take Tylenol immediately. And number 2, if you want to get the fever down, do a tepid sponge bath
You take a little basin of clean water, you put a tap full of 70% isopropyl alcohol, and then it sponges. You do that, it should bring the temperature a degree or two down. And of course, when your patient is, they're going to be dehydrated, and of course, you're going to lose a lot of water through your skin. So make sure to hydrate your patient. Now, mild fever is good, but anything above 40 degrees and 104 is not the cutoff. Around 100, 101, that's the cutoff. When it gets to 104, 105, the patient is going to get seizures because your brain doesn't like the environment it's in, so it's start gonna fight back. And around 105, your brain may go into a coma. Now, what's a coma? A coma is when your brain doesn't like the environment and goes, hey, you know, guys, until you get the environment fixed, I'm going to shut off the overload. So when you have a high-grade fever, anyone ever had a high-grade fever? Right? In the beginning, it's really cool, right? You feel a little high and it's a little fun. But once it gets to 104, because I had malaria and I had a 106-degree fever, and I had seizures twice, according to the nurse, which I don't remember, but I was hallucinating, and it was funny because the nurse said, Dr. Garais, you were so entertaining. You were trying to speak French the entire time. Because, I don't know, the camp I was in, there were a lot of French doctors that were trying to teach me French, and for whatever reason. And can cause, no, not can, will. You'll have central nervous system problems. So you start hallucinating, you know, a whole bunch of it. And malaria ain't fun. Oh my God, that was so painful. But again, you know, the mistakes of youth, you gotta be adventurous while you're still young. Now let's look at the T cells. Now, where do we get our T cells? Our thymus, which then begs the question, where do we get our B cells? I want you to think B bone, right? B, they call it bursa equivalent. Something to do with bursa fabricus and chickens. I don't want to talk about that. The easiest way is what? B bone. Thymus is what? T. So how does this work? You have cell-mediated immunity or humoral immunity, which is B cell. Humoral, B cell. Cell-mediated, T cell. So let's look at, remember we talked about B cells, right? What happened? You get exposed to something, you're making these specific antibodies. The B cell turns into a plasma cell, and the plasma cell makes these Y-shaped, very, very specific, only to the thing that it got exposed. And that's why these B cells, especially this plasma cell, is called a memory cell, because it remembers, right? Hence the term memory B cell. Now, what's the T cell? We already talked about, you have the T helper, it stuck on to the bad thing, and it did what? It tattled. And once it tattled, who came in? The T cytotoxic. The T cytotoxic, the thug, then did what? Phagocytose, kill it. But then the T cell was like, you know what? I don't want to deal with this again. So, hey, B cell, can you make me some antibodies? And then it goes then to here. So you can see how this hinges on a lot of things. What kind of questions could come up? Where do we get T cells from? Oh, we get it from my thymus. Develops all the way until puberty. Where do I get my B cells from? I got them from my bones. Which one has the T helper and T cytotoxic, or the T helper, also known as an antigen presenting cell? T cell, right? Which one makes memory cells? B cells, they're called plasma, makes antibodies. They make it directly. Who makes memory cells indirectly? The T cell that tells the B cell, hey, remember what just happened over here. This actually turns into this. So I want you to start looking at, when you're looking at your, what is that called? The IR. When you're looking at that and when you're looking at these slides, right? Yes, you're getting that information, but also you're prepping yourself for future quizzes and future exams, because now you can see, you see how it chopped it down the middle? It's all, every time you see a comparison, you know it's going to come out. And there's going to be a question, is it B cell? Is it T cell? Is it humoral or antibody-mediated immunity? Or is it cell-mediated or thymus-mediated immunity? That's T cell. Okay, that's a lovely picture, by the way. I just wish they put CD8. Wait, maybe I can draw it. Let's see if I can draw it. And so this is the T helper. So this is, maybe I have to draw it over there. Here's a pointer pen. Now I won't do it. I think I was supposed to set it up. So of course, T helper. Wait, so there's a dot there. There we go. There you go. So T helper, CD4 plus cell, and this one's what? Attacking, killing. So this got to be the CD8 cell. And then the CD4 cell gets lazy and then goes, hey, you know what? Come on, B cell. Now you can see this thing hinges on a lot of stuff. So who attacks the CD4 cell? Let's make an arrow. Oopsie, wrong place. We're gonna make an arrow here. Who attacks this? H. I. U. Question? No, these are T cells here on the right side.
Yeah.
And these are B cells on the left side.
They're all T cells, and they have different names, right?
Yeah, because one's a T helper, one type of T cell, and the other one's a T killer or T cytotoxic, right? So when you think cytotoxic or killer, that's a thug, right? It's not a thinking person. This is a doer. This is the tattletale of the CD4 plus. This is CD8. And HIV loves CD4s.
The CD4 is the one that detects the problem, or is that the
Yeah,
one that
CD4, see how it kind of latched on? And now it's tattling. So once it tattles to the CD8. And then what do you think the CD8 will do? It'll do that. It'll phagocytose it and kill it. And then the CD4 travels all the way to the other side of the fence to the B cell and go, hey, you know what? I don't want to do this again. Can you make memory cells for me? Because, you know, I'm kind of tired. That's my way of thinking. And you see what I did? I did it like a story. So if you learn it as a story, that's like one box. And then now you can differentiate T cells versus B cells. And you can now see how this B cell is different than the plasma cell, and how the B cell will then make what? The Y-shaped proteins called antibodies. And those antibodies are what? Immunoglobulins. You find them where? In the plasma. So you can see how you make the boxes that you put your information, link the boxes together, you can answer almost every type of question. All right, let's just do one more slide. Well, actually, a couple more. We did active immunity. We did passive immunity. We already did that. I don't know why they didn't do this. I guess they're wrapping it up. I don't know. But of course, active, that means what? You had to be exposed, then you had to get sick. Artificial, you're gonna think what? It's a vaccine. Passive, you're gonna think from another source. Natural, like mommy, breast milk, and of course what? Antibodies are injected, so you're gonna think vaccine, right? So vaccines, right? If antibody production through vaccines, so this is how you distinguish it. Artificially acquired, if you have active immunity, you know how when you get a vaccine, you get a little bit of a fever, or you get a little sick. Anyone here got the flu vaccine? Almost every time I get a flu vaccine, I get a little bit of the flu. Not a lot, just enough like for a couple of days. But when I got other vaccines, I took it, well, nothing happened to me, right? I didn't actively get sick. It just passively went through, and antibodies are injected into the fight infection. Now, I want you to think vaccines are on this side, because what are these antibodies from? Have you ever seen a lot of these commercials, and a lot of them have the name of the drug? The last part of the drug is called MAB. MAB stands for monoclonal antibody. A lot of the modern drugs nowadays deal with antibodies. They attack specific things, especially for like, you know, hay fever and stuff like that. Like afiximab is for like hay fever. And what are they doing? They are injecting, or they're with the pill, they're putting antibodies into your system, and that's passive. So think vaccine, I want you to think what? Active. And talking about meds that have antibodies in it, and actually this is the current state of a lot of more advanced medications. It's called genetic medicine. We like specific antibodies to attack specific things. Was there a question? No? All right. So again, another lovely active versus passive, another lovely question could come out here. Now, one of these properties is these definitions. So specificity. It means how specific is the antigen to something, right? And also, we also say the same thing for tests and for drugs. So there are certain drugs that, and certain tests that are highly specific, or they have high specificity, meaning that they recognize only a specific antigen. Now, versatility means what? You can have this or you can have that. So that means the versatility is actually the exact opposite of specificity. Okay? Memory, of course, we know memory cells, B cells. Now, tolerance. Now, there's certain things that your body deals with and doesn't react to it. So that means it tolerates. And one of the many things is self-generated antigens. Now, if self-generated antigens go awry or wrong, then you have something called an autoimmune disease. Auto means self. An autoimmune disease, and I think that's one of your questions on your IR, an autoimmune disease is when your body cannot recognize it as itself. So it's friendly fire. And you know that term, friendly fire? It's when you fire upon your own people. So you have antibodies that don't recognize you as a good guy. So it starts attacking what? All the good cells, and that's bad. And the classic one is systemic lupus erythematosus is a little bit rare, but something that's even better than that is what? Asthma. Okay. What is asthma actually is? It's an exaggerated immune response or immune response. Right? So you're attacking yourself. And it could be what? It could be B cells, it could be T cells, right? And tolerance is when your body recognizes you as you, so it doesn't attack it. But then when you lose that tolerance, well, that's a problem. Then you have an autoimmune disease. Remember the antibodies come from B cells. Now, here's the funny thing. Antibody secretion takes what? A week or two. Hey, you know what's funny? How long does viral infections typically last? A week or two. Right? So, could you get reinfected during the next 7 to 10 days? Yes. That's why if you ever get really sick, like Monday to Thursday, felt like you were going to go recover, and then Sunday you got hit again, right? And then typically viruses, if you have a good immune system, should what do you call that? They're called self-limiting. That means within 7 to 10 days, even if you don't do anything about it, the common cold should go away. But if you're immunocompromised, it won't. Secondary response is easy because we know that what? B cells. Primary response is when you first time you saw the pathogen. Now, secondary response is the second time. And the second time around, don't you have memory cells? So things will go what? Faster, way faster, right? And remember we talked about those immunoglobulins, those immune proteins? Who is the first one on set? Who is the first responder? IgG. Immunoglobulin G. So therefore, if you have a lot of immunoglobulin G in your plasma, right, your immunoglobulins, that means what? Memory cells or B cells are doing something, and your body is responding to something that you've seen before. and that's your secondary response. If we're looking at this is your antibody. Remember that Y-shaped protein? Now, this top part here, this is where it gets specific. This top part here on the light chain, which they call the variable region, you don't need to know that. Just know that if you see something that's in the shape of a Y and it's coming out of a B cell, that means it's what? It's an antibody. It's highly specific. And the chemistry here on the top means what? This thing is going. This thing is only going to attack the thing that it was created to attack. It's not going to attack anything else. Only that. Only the thing that was assigned. Now this next slide's pretty good. IgG we already know, right? Secondary response. It's large. It's huge, right? And it's just think it's large. It's huge. It's first. It's in obstetrics, it's in everywhere. IgM, cross reaction on blood type. Also, another thing about it attacks bacteria. IgM is really, really popular. I call it IG McDonald's because it's really popular in like food poisoning. So you see IgM, typically it's bacterial food poisoning, but it also could be cross reaction blood type. Less for that, but every time I see IgM, I think McDonald's. IgA, I think secretory IgA, secretions, so tears and saliva. Your eyeballs, every time you close your eyes, it washes. You ever look at the sun and then you go like this, and then don't you see like little bugs and stuff floating around? Am I the only one that does that? Yeah, you see like dots and little things swimming around. Well, guess what? Those are dead things because what killed it? A bunch of enzymes and immunoglobulin A, which is in your tears. You also have immunoglobulin A in your saliva because no matter what you do with food, you could nuke it, you could wash it. It's still what? It's nasty. It's dirty. Ever take like in your vegetables and stuff? Put it in water a little longer than you usually do, and then take a good look at that water. You're not going to want to eat that thing anymore, right? But we have IgA in our saliva, in our tears, and they'll attack it. IgE, you know what I remember IgE for? Because it's basophils and inflammatory response. I think allergies. You know the word allergy, but I call it allergies. So IgE, the inflammatory process regarding a typical allergy, and that's IgE. And then, what is IgE? Well, it's attached to B cells and aids in sensitization. Now, what's sensitization? Oh, remember the D antigen? That's the Rh factor. So let's talk about how sensitization works. Rh factor is really big in obstetrics because if mommy is Rh negative and baby is Rh positive, mommy is going to develop antibodies to hurt baby. But the funny part is, it's not the first baby. The first baby has to expose mommy to those D antigens. It's the second baby that's going to get hit. And that's why you got to be sensitized. Here's a classic example. I've been taking care of animals half my life, and then I took care of, for 2 years, thousands of laboratory rats and what do you call that? Bunnies, right? Oh, we're like, no, bunny. Bunnies are one of the most evil animals in the world. I got several stitches in my arm to prove it. They are vicious, and their hindquarters, they can do a number on you, right? Even the small ones. And I also deal with sager rats. They're about this big. They have red eyes, very large teeth, and we house them in a big pen. And it's quite frightening because I'd have to go inside the pen, surrounded by rats. It looks like a horror movie. Then you got to go pick them up, and then you got to sacrifice them one by one so you can do experiments and stuff. Well, I did that for years. I didn't scratch. Now, my kid brings like a hamster for half a day into his house. What happens? I'm itching all over the place. So when did I get sensitized? IgD. I got sensitized while I was working. And then I developed antibodies. And then what happened? Years later, when my kids want to have pets, they're like, but you had pets. Yeah, but look, you see, I got hives, I can't breathe. So my kids can't have any pets. And they're like, can we get the cat with no hair? No, because that thing's frightening, right? I'd rather have a snake. I told my wife, we can have snakes. Snakes don't bother me, but it's the pet dander. And I grew up with dogs. I grew up with a lot of dogs. But what happened? I got sensitized. My B cells did what? They found something that bothered my immune system, then developed antibodies, but then it was what? A lot slower. And we're going to find out why. And that's IgG. So IgG, think what? Grand, big, first up, all right? IgM, McDonald's, bacteria. Always there every day, right? IgA, secretory IgA, right? To me, my eyes, I look at somebody crying, and there's like little A's down here. IgE, allergies, and IgD, D looks like a B, and I think what? I just think of those stupid rats and bunnies, and they got D on them. Now, do you see how silly and how stupid my memory games are? They're built for who? They're built for what? Just like antibodies, they're built specifically for me. You develop whatever silliness that you need to do to get it into your head. Oh, by the way, all these mnemonics, when was my undergrad? Last time I was in anatomy, gross anatomy, before medical school was 1989. So all these games, I've been playing what, since 1989. So it'll stick in my head, so it won't fall out. Because then, little did I know, I needed it for medical school, I needed it for graduate school. I'm gonna keep on doing that. All right, give me one more thing, and then we can take another break. Hypersensitivity. There are 4 types, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, this is how I remember my hypersensitivities. I remember them like a story. So the first one is what? Type 1. If you look at 1, look at the word immediate, right? It starts with an I. Roman numeral 1 is what? An I. So I think what? Hay fever. Because you know when you go out and if you have hay fever, when you get exposed, you get itchy when? And remember, IgE is what? Allergies. So that's type 1. Immediate happens. Type 2, right? I think blood, right? Antibody dependent. And we know that blood has antigens and antibodies. And if I give the wrong blood, that's what? 2 people, isn't it? One person gave the wrong blood to another person. So that's 2, type 2. Type 3, autoimmune, right? That means I'm attacking myself. That means my body can't recognize the good guys from the bad guys. So it's attacking itself. And type 4 is dead last. And if you're dead last, you're what? The lead. Now type 4, this is what I remember. Dermatitis. I remember I was walking down the street, if you ever, well, in any city, you go to New York City, especially when you go down to Little Italy, a lot of stuff is like, you know, like the little street fairs and stuff. You know, all that jewelry is just garbage, right? Don't touch it, right? Well, the girl I was with, she was like, oh God, I really like it. But she didn't know this is my last $6, right? And I was like hoping to get some pizza. I guess that's out, right? Of course, I'm a simp, so I need the $3 or whatever, right? Because also I needed $1 for the token. See, this is, you got no cash, you gotta be masked all the time, right? So I'm like, okay, I haggled a street guy, got $3, and she had this wonderful basin. It's turned into type 4 hypersensitivity because I go, okay, I'm DJing tonight, go meet in the club. Later on in the night, club, look what happened. It was like purple and green and it's all itchy. She goes, what kind of thing did you just buy me? And I'm like, and then I remember what, right? The last thing, the late type hypersensitivity. So if you ever had that, like maybe some cheap metal or something like that, like you're allergic to it, right? And then you touched it, but then hours later,
Dr. Garais,